Hi, this is a presentation from the Ontario Pesticide Education Program. And we've had some farmers ask about what happens when PMRA comes to visit and how can I be better prepared. So I've prepared a 30-minute presentation that I can share with you. I am the coordinator, Susan Kellner, and my email address is there, skellner@uoguelph.ca, and I'd welcome to hear from you or your responses after the presentation. As we go through then, we'll start out by explaining that the grower pesticide safety course is available through our program. It certifies farmers in being able to buy and apply class 2 and 3 pesticides in Ontario. It's a one-day course, or we have an online format as well, or you can renew by just studying at home and writing the tests. So certification is $105. We also have pesticide safety for farmer assistance, an on-farm instructor course. If you are a certified farmer, you'd like to look after the training of assistants who may help you or anyone else who is certified on the farm to apply pesticides, you could be the on-farm instructor, a half-day course for $65. Each assistant that the on-farm instructor trains registers with us after the training and is assistant for $25 each. The Pesticide Safety for Farm Workers is a new free book that we created and developed a couple of years ago, and it is addressing safety that farm workers should know. They're not the workers that are applying or touching the pesticide, but because they're working at a place that uses pesticides, there's some good safety information to pass along to them. And just call us to order the free books and we can provide them for you. So we have certified farmers on a farm, farmer assistants, farm workers that don't handle pesticides. Also, you could apply class 2 or 3 pesticides if you were a licensed exterminator greenhouse for the greenhouse businesses, or a licensed exterminator agriculture. If you're doing outside land applications, you would need either one of those for the situation. You could apply to an agricultural greenhouse or an agricultural land extermination. Anyone working under you as a licensed exterminator, though, you need to have them as technicians, not as farmer assistants. So for our courses then, go to opep.ca and we'll have dates and locations during the year for our courses: the grower pesticide safety course, the on-farm instructor course, and the pesticide vendor certification course. All right, what happens during an inspection? Health Canada, then, just as a reminder, holds the federal legislation, the Pest Control Products Act and regulations, and is responsible for administering it. And they do that under the Pest Management Regulatory Agency, the PMRA. They also have a Regulatory Operations and Regions branch, and your inspectors would sit under that branch and would do the regional inspections of a farm for compliance with the Pest Control Products Act and regulations. The objective of PMRA is to prevent unacceptable risks to people and the environment from the use of pesticides by minimizing the risks associated with pest control products in an open and transparent manner. So looking after agriculture and looking after workers. When a PMRA inspector visits, they're looking first, of course, with compliance to the Pest Controls Products Act and regulation, and the product label directions. So have you read the precautions? Are you following the precautions, the use directions, storage, disposal, spill response? As well, the Provincial Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks. We have the Pesticides Act and Regulation 6309 in Ontario, the provincial laws that might not be written on the pesticide label but could be referred to on the pesticide label, such that storage and disposal, it usually states on the pesticide label to follow the provincial requirements for that. And in that case, the federal inspector would be able to relate to charges for storage or disposal that didn't meet the provincial regulations as well. Certification, training, licensing of users. Sometimes pesticide products have the statement on them to be used by a certified applicator or a licensed applicator. So again, PMRA would be looking at who is using the product, and also would you be ready to respond to a spill and any accident response, either on the road or in your location on the farm. Municipality also have bylaws, and you would need to be aware of your local bylaws regarding pesticide use. Okay, PMRA inspections may be done, 1, in response to a complaint, 2, as part of their yearly inspection program, 3, as a spontaneous spot check. So either or all of those could happen. In 2016-2017, the report of the inspections is on the PMRA website, and you can go there and download the report. Summarizing it here, in 2016-17, a total of 1,067 inspections were conducted, plus an additional 233 in response to complaints. Most incidents of non-compliance included an unregistered product in storage, an unregistered product used on a crop, a registered product used contrary to the label, and then obsolete pesticides found in the storage. Now, when I refer to an unregistered product, not registered in Canada. So perhaps you'd bought that product maybe 5 years ago. The product use was canceled because of a recall or a reevaluation or a special review. It's no longer registered, and we haven't gotten rid of it yet, and it's still in the pesticide storage. Unregistered product used on a crop, so that product could still be used on your crop. It shouldn't be used on your crop. You can have an unregistered product, meaning that the product has a US label and maybe doesn't have a Canadian label, and therefore it's not registered for Canadian use. And an unregistered product used contrary to the label, if you used it on tomatoes and it was labeled for tomatoes, then you wanted to go ahead and use it on peppers. However, peppers is not on the label and you went ahead and used it, then that would be contrary to the label. And obsolete pesticides in storage. What's obsolete? Obsolete would be an old pesticide you need to get rid of. It's no longer used, and it's just sitting in your storage. So those are things that happen as non-compliance when an inspector comes through. When the inspectors come through, of those 1,067 inspections, 80% required a change. And a change and a request for a change can come in 4 ways. A request for a change during the visit, a verbal suggestion that you should change something, a letter, enforcement letter, with requests for a change, a compliance order with directions for changes, or fines. Under the Administrative Monetary Penalties Act, which came in about 1997. Now there can be ticketed fines for different offenses against the Pest Control Products Act. So just like you would get a ticket for speeding, you could get a ticket for storing an unregistered product in your storage. So you could have a fine against you there. So those are the 4 ways in response to an inspection. I just would note, I believe the report said that of the 80% that required a change, 70% did make the change later upon reinspection. So that's good news that better safety practices and some of these violations were dealt with quickly. So inspections, misuse, the misuse of the product, not labeled for specific crop pest, application rates too high, not leaving the buffer zone, not following the REI restricted entry interval, not following the pre-harvest interval, use of a product that is no longer registered, it's canceled and recalled. Consequences of misuse. Well, the worst would be, of course, not being able to sell the crop for food safety reasons. Residues are too high. Perhaps crop damage might occur. Your worker could get ill or sick, worker exposure if the proper protective clothing equipment wasn't used, and adverse environmental impacts are also a possibility. So what will be asked of me during an inspection? Well, I divided that into two things, documents and work areas. So you probably want to have some information readily available, and you'd also want to have some work areas that are always ready available. And the inspector will want to walk through and see those work areas for pesticides. And here you could pause the video. What information do I need to have ready at all times for an inspector? Just take a minute, write down maybe 5 or 6 things that you can think of that you might want to have ready. Number 2, what will the inspector want to inspect? I think you could probably sit down and think of 5, 6, maybe 10 areas in your workplace regarding pesticides that the inspector may want to inspect. Here's the list that I came up with would be application records. You want to have the originals somewhere. Maybe these are posted anyway all the time for your other workers, but have them ready for the inspector. A list of pesticides in inventory. If this was posted by the Pesticide Storage, that would be an excellent thing to do. Keep invoices from purchases, current labels, and current SDS of the products you're using. A list of certified farmers, farmer assistants, and the expiry date, and maybe have those posted. Best practices procedures for handling pesticides, best practices for workers other than applicators, and have those posted. Possibly, what would the inspector want to inspect? The storage location might be an obvious one. Your pesticide application equipment, the sprayer, the hoses, wash-up areas for the pesticide equipment, cleanup, how is that done? Wash-up areas for workers and pesticide applicators, getting out of their protective clothing equipment, washing that up. Protective clothing equipment, is there a personal set for each applicator? And are there replacement parts and supplies readily available, and where are those kept, and are they clean, and is that area well labeled? The crop, the inspector may take samples to check for residue levels. The REI notification procedures, the REI signs, are they available to be posted to notify other workers that you're making an application and you're not to come in for 12 hours or 24 hours? Demonstration of an application, first aid kits, spill kits, wash-up stations, eye wash stations, all those things would be great to be able to show the inspector when the inspector walks through. So talking a little bit more about the key documents we have identified, and I'm going to think about the 5, the pesticide application records, the names of pesticides with safety notes, maybe the names of the certified and trained applicators, each label, and the SDS, and an inventory of pesticides in storage. I would concentrate on those key documents to have ready. Pesticide application record, this is an example that we put in the Grower Pesticide Safety Course Manual. However, you can keep the data that you keep on a pesticide application record, how you keep it, whether it's in the computer, on your mobile device, as long as you can produce them for the inspector, that would be great. And what you decide to put on them, what you want to do with that record is keep a record for efficacy. You want to know that, that pesticide product is doing the job you want it to do, and you'd be able to repeat the use, but also to show for an inspector that you are using it according to what the label wanted you to use it. So what is the earliest harvest date, restricted entry interval date, the resistant group number for that pesticide group, growth stage, growing conditions. So those are all things that you might want to include on your pesticide record. Again, that's up to you as the professional farmer to know what you would want to keep on that record. Records and standard operating practices show that you follow the label, and that's what the inspector is interested in, making sure that you are using that pesticide according to that label. So the product is labeled for the pest in crop. You're using it with the pesticide rate, the sprayer application rate that's recommended, the storage disposal requirements, restricted entry intervals, and protective clothing and equipment. Now, pesticide labels are online, readily available if you're connected online, and there's an app now. So if you go to your search engine and you put in the words pesticide label search Health Canada, you should get to the right location where you could download the app or just go in and use it on the website. You can put in and search for the registration number, a product name, even a crop, um, anything you want on the product label to bring up the product label. Then when you have it there on the search as shown here on the slide, you would click on the registration number, and it's behind that number that you will have a copy of the full, most up-to-date, recent pesticide label for that pesticide. Okay. List of pesticides. So now that you know which product you're going to use and you have an idea of what you want to use, you're looking at each of those labels to find out the information for safety purposes and application purposes. So I would summarize that on a list. These are the things I would pull out, and if I could show the inspector these are the products we're using and we're aware of these safety features of the product, I would put a certified farmer or the applicator's name and certificate number next to the product. They're responsible for that product. They're the ones that are looking after the application. Product name, the PCP Act number, and that number singly identifies a particular product, and that's useful even in an emergency for first aid or going to the hospital with someone who's had an accident. That product is identified then to the Ontario Poison Center and also the hospital upon arrival. The Ontario class. So Ontario class is not on a label because that's a provincial classification, not a federal classification. So you're going to have to go and find out what the Ontario class is, because how you use the product, how you store it, how you dispose of it, and who applies the product depends on what Ontario class that is. Is it a 2 or a 3 or a 4? So go to your search engine again, put in the words Pesticide Database Classification Ontario, and that should put you right to the main page for looking up the Ontario class. And again, you can put in a PCP Act number or the product name, and it will come up with the Ontario class for you. Crop and pest, good to write that down so you're making sure you're using it on the right crop and pest. Pesticide rate, sprayer rate, REI, PHI, and under safety notes, I would put, might wear coveralls, boots, and nitrile gloves for any pesticide you're touching on the farm. But in addition, perhaps that pesticide says skin irritant or eye irritant or danger eye irritant, then the addition of goggles, perhaps the addition of a particulate filter respirator, or perhaps a cartridge respirator is required. You could make note there that in addition to your regular covering of protective clothing, these are the equipment items that you would need for this particular product. So a summary. Now I took a few products that I looked up and I filled out a chart that could be an example for you to look at, and you can see some of them require goggles, some of them require a particulate respirator and a cartridge respirator there for the Agrotech Ascend, which is the second line down. Also with that one, it's a suspension in air, so it actually requires provincially 2 certified farmers to be present during the application. That's under the Pesticides Act and Regulation 6309. And also would require 4 air exchangers in the greenhouse if it was used in an enclosed space in the greenhouse. So picking out some of those special statements that occur on a particular pesticide because of its characteristics, good to have as a summary. And so the inspector knows that you're aware of that product and the details of that product, and you've done a thorough read of the pesticide label. I would suggest posting the names of certified trained and licensed applicators. So who is using the class 2 or pesticides on the farm, and post that up, post it on the central bulletin board, your safety board, and then just like you would do with a certification for first aid, and letting others know who is the person that has that knowledge regarding the safe use of pesticides on the farm. Inventory of pesticides in storage, another good document to have. Put this up close to the storage if you can. Post it somewhere there. Update it monthly, weekly. How often is this changing on your farm? So how often you have to update it would depend on that. Product name, container size, and maybe the number of containers. And then you would have a volume of product in your inventory. Put the date on it, put the person who's responsible for checking that, and then you're all up to date with an inventory. In the awful event of a fire, the firefighters would need an inventory, and they want to know where your pesticides are stored, plus any other hazardous materials on the farm. But if you could produce a list in a hurry for a fire response, the inventory is an excellent thing to do for that. Work areas. So the inspector arrives. Some key work areas the inspector can go to: the pesticide storage areas, the mixing and loading area, spill response equipment, is that readily available? Where are the workers decontaminating after a pesticide application? Where is the spray equipment stored? And is there a notice area, a safety central bulletin board where information regarding pesticide applications are posted? And those are key areas that the inspector may be looking for. And as they walk through, here is a pesticide storage checklist. Take the time to go through your pesticide storage. If it's really busy and there's lots of in and outs, do it more often. If you're a farmer on your own and you're the only one that goes into the pesticide storage, then you might not have to do this quite so often. So it'll depend. Here's a list though, and you can say yes, 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 no, 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 or things to improve. Date your inspection. Show the inspector that you are looking after your pesticide storage. A reminder on the side there, if storing a class 2 or 3 biological pesticide in a refrigerator, the refrigerator must be locked or in a locked room if it is a class 2 or 3 pesticide, and many of those biological pesticides are class 3 pesticides because there is a respiratory hazard with them. So that would have to be locked as well. Just a heads up there. Be aware that the next obsolete pesticides collection is in the fall of 2019, usually mid-September. So put a reminder in your calendar or in your phone right now to check the website on Clean Farms for the dates and locations in your area that the obsolete pesticides collection will happen in about usually mid-September to early October, and take a look. Should be lots of notification for that, but this will make you personally aware. And here, even last year, well, this is in the 2016 collection site, and we had DDT show up. So some of the old pesticides are still out there in storages. It's time to get those cleaned up, and it's absolutely free. It just makes the time to do it and to get there on that particular day. Okay, an example of a mixing and loading place in a greenhouse. There's the weigh scale is there. There's cleaned mixing, measuring containers, and everything's been put away. So best practices, always be clean and orderly. Someone's looking after some of these workplaces for you. The spray equipment can be tucked away in a spot where it always seems to go. The hoses are clean, that has been rinsed and sitting there for next use. The jugs have been emptied and triple rinsed, and labels have been removed. The caps have been taken off. It's a different plastic for the cap, and you can see here they've just popped the caps into the box in front, and also punctured. Make that container unusable for anything else. So someone won't be tempted to come in and put water or oil or any other liquid into that container. They've had pesticides in them. They're not to be used for anything else. Puncture them, collect them in a bin or a side caged area within the pesticide storage building. And when that's full and you've got a load, then take them to the nearest pesticide collection site. Again, Clean Farms looks after running those sites, and if you need to know where that is, it's usually the place where you purchase the product, but you can always check online to see on the Clean Farms website where those sites are. Okay, another thing that's easy to post and needs to be posted with the pesticide storage or close by or on your safety board or on your pesticide notice board, emergency numbers. The first aid kit should be handy. And outside the pesticide storage, great to have protective clothing equipment in a container that would be used for emergency response only, not for a regular pesticide application, but there in case of an emergency or a spill that anyone could put on the proper protective clothing and personal protective equipment. Worker safety practices. Now, who could be exposed on a farm and in a greenhouse, but this could be any farm, certified farmers, farmer assistants, they're going to be exposed or more accessible to the pesticides as they're working with them, so they do have to watch that they do not get exposed. But we can have other farm workers, part-time workers doing contract jobs. You can have an IPM scout coming in once a week or a consultant coming in, contractors, visitors, and students. So they need to be aware when they enter, if they can't find you right away, or when they enter into the farm, is there a number posted where they're announcing that they are there and that you're aware that they're there and that they're aware of any pesticide applications going on the time when they show up. So just thinking about the safety of other people entering into the greenhouse or on a farm. This is not greenhouse specific, although we've used all these greenhouse examples. Universal pest best practices. You can make it simple by making best practices work habits. So if it's something you do all the time, you're just keeping things neat and clean and orderly. This is how we do this task. It's about safety for food and people. Right, so the workers need to be safe, and you need to have your product, your food product, ready to go without any pesticide residues. Okay, so a universal practice might be to always wear coveralls, boots, and nitrile gloves anytime you're touching a pesticide. Then, depending on the particular product you're using, you would add protective eyewear, a respirator mask with a good seal, appropriate to the person and only fitted to each person, and maybe a hood and hat as extra protection. Okay, cleaning up at work, you want to have an area where the applicators can go and clean up their equipment. They're handling their own respirator, they're cleaning it, they're taking off the cartridge, they're able to put on a new cartridge when they want to. There's lots of supplies, and it's named for them to look after. Okay, what to do before an application. Check for that restricted entry interval. Are you letting people know? You could post a sign to let them know I'm applying a pesticide. You're not to enter until 24 hours has passed, and post the spray schedule so people know that you're actually going to be doing that in this block or that area on this day. Restricted entry intervals. Okay, an example of a 24-hour restricted entry interval. If you see it's a 24-hour restricted entry interval, then for the first 4 hours, do not enter. Nobody enters after that application. You can see the end of the application is the start of the timing of the 24-hour restricted entry interval. From 4 to 12 hours, early entry by certified farmers. Do not do hand labor tasks. You can go in, but you must be in the area for less than 1 hour in the 24-hour period. You can wear the protective clothing and protective clothing and personal protective equipment stated on the label for mixing, plus wearing the NIOSH approved respirator. All right, so that's how you would have an early entry by a certified farmer from the 4 to 12 hours if you had to go in there for some reason. The next stage is the 12 to 24 hours. Other workers could have an early entry. They're not doing any hand labor tasks, but wearing protective clothing and personal protective equipment, they can enter into the area if they want, not to touch any surfaces that may have residues. And finally, after 24 hours, it's the end of the restricted entry interval on the label and anyone may enter. Available from the Ontario Pesticide Education Program. We have videos on YouTube. Our channel is Ontario Pesticide Ed. And you can show those videos and use them for staff training. Emergency numbers magnet. You can have that magnet free of charge from us and post that up and add in your own personal numbers for emergencies. The Pesticide Spills Action Plan sticker. And there's information there that you can post so that if a spill happens, you're already thinking wear protective clothing equipment, keeping others away, stopping and containing the spill, reporting to the municipality and the Spills Action Center, and there's the number for you, and you're going to start cleanup. We have a series of posters as well that you can have for your workplace on the farm and post them as reminders of certain tasks to do for safety of pesticides. Okay, again, the grower pesticide safety course, pesticide safety for farmer assistance, the instructor guide, and those instructor courses. And we also do pesticide safety for farm workers. We have a free book that you might want to pass along to your other workers on the farm to inform them of safety. So our website, opep.ca, for those 3 course offerings. Just like to mention, we did do a survey in 2017 of the on-farm instructors about the safety of farm employees. And it does show that there is certainly a good priority for having a safe farm. Farm safety culture, 84% stated that there was a full-time worker certified in first aid. 49% discussed safety with workers daily or weekly. Record keeping, 93% keep records of each pesticide application. 100% inform workers about pesticides and 79% inform workers about each application. And how do the certified farmers inform their workers about an application? 82% tell them, 41% post signs near the application area, 18% post information in a central location. What do the certified farmers tell the workers? 91% the date of application, the location, 71% time, 71% the restricted entry intervals. So protective clothing equipment. What do our workers wearing when they're working in a crop? And these aren't the applicators, these are the farm workers. 77% wear long sleeve shirts, long pants most or all the time. 66% wear gloves. 39% would be using chemical resistant gloves most or all the time. And how do certified farmers or on-farm instructors prefer to train? Well, 59% would train their own workers, 22% would send them to a course, 15% would invite a pesticide safety instructor to the farm, and 3% would use videos available. So again, Ontario Pesticide Education Program, opep.ca, rcopep@uoguelph.ca for our email address, and 1-800-652-8573. And thanks.